it's Jen from Windrose Fiber Studio. Today we're going to be working on part 2 of my mini mucks pattern. Mini mucks are boot-shaped ankle-high slipper socks. In part 1, we made our granny squares. If you missed part 1, I will leave a link for that in the description below. Part 1 contains a list of materials as well as all of the information you need to help you achieve the size mini mucks that you're going for. Today in part 2, we're going to be adding our complementary color to one of our granny squares. We're going to be adding on to all 4 sides of this granny square. There'll be 2 triangles at the top and 2 squares at the bottom. I've already made one of my boots, and you can see that this is the top center square of the boot. Our squares will be turned on their corners and will look more diamond shaped on the mini mucks. In part 1, you made 6 granny squares. The loose ends should be all woven in. And now it's time to choose the 2 granny squares that you would like to use as the top front of your mini mucks. These 2 squares are going to be used for the toe and the back of the boot, so I'm going to set those aside. This is the square I'm going to be using today, and now we can jump right in. Actually, before we start crocheting, I do think it's really helpful to have stitch markers in the corner stitches of your granny squares. If for some reason you don't have stitch markers, I just wanted to show you how easy it is to use a little piece of yarn. So I've just cut 3 or 4 inches of yarn. I'm folding it in half and doing a yarn over in the very middle over my crochet hook, pulling it through the center stitch, and I'm doing a yarn over with both of the ends and pulling it through. If you've ever done a latch hook project, it's very much like that. You can trim these down a little bit. That's just a very easy way to mark a stitch with a scrap piece of yarn, and it's just a slip knot, so when you're done with that stitch marker, you can just pull it right out. I just wanted to share that with you because I use stitch markers in a lot of my tutorials, but I never want anyone to feel like they have to go out and buy stitch markers just to do one of these projects. Okay, now we're going to dive in and we're going to work on our first shape. You'll need your crochet hook and your second color, whatever complementary yarn that you chose to go with your granny squares. And we're going to be joining it just to the left of any one of our center stitches. Now, our first stitch is going to be a single crochet. If you like using standing single crochets, you just insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. But let me show you what I like to do. Because this is a piece with a lot of parts, you end up with a lot of loose ends, and so I want to show you a little trick so that you don't have to weave in quite as many loose ends at the end of this project. So instead of joining with a standing single crochet, I'm actually going to join in that stitch with a slip stitch. And I'm going to be carrying that beginning tail along with me. I'm going to chain 1, and now I'm going to start this row by working 2 single crochets into that same stitch. By joining with the slip stitch, it makes it easy for me to carry that beginning tail without pulling on the first single crochet. This will save you some time later on. You'll have fewer loose ends to weave in at the end of this project. If you don't mind weaving in those beginning tails, you can start this row with a standing single crochet and then work a second one in that first stitch and carry on with the row as written. So after you work those 2 single crochets in the same stitch as you're joining, you'll work 1 single crochet in each of the next 8 stitches and then work 2 single crochets in the last stitch. The last stitch will be the stitch just before the next corner. Row 1 will have a total of 12 single crochets. At the end of row 1, you might need to pull that beginning tail a little bit if that yarn is kind of loose in your work. You can see I'm just pulling all that extra yarn out of my stitches. I'm also being careful not to cinch this row, not to pull the work so that it's tighter, just to make sure that my stitches are nice and even. Before I start row 2, I'm going to move that beginning tail between my working yarn and the hook. Chain 1 and turn. I'm going to carry the beginning tail across row 2 as well, and when I reach the end of the beginning tail, I'll just trim that off and consider that a woven in tail. For row 2, you're simply going to be working 1 single crochet in each stitch across. Row 2 will have a total of 12 stitches. I'm coming to the end of my beginning tail, so I'm just going to snip off that little bit of extra and then continue on with row 2. Here we are on the last stitch of row 2, and then we begin row 3 with a chain 1 and turn. I just wanted to take a moment here and point out to you, if you ever get confused about which is the right side and the wrong side of your work, when the right side of the granny square is facing, the ends curl up like a little cup, and when the wrong side is facing, they curve down like a dome. Back to our row 3, work a single crochet in the first stitch, and then a single crochet decrease. To do so, you insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. That's how you work the single crochet decrease, and then you're going to single crochet in each of the next 6 stitches. Then single crochet decrease and single crochet in the last stitch. Row 3 has a total of 10 stitches. For row 4, you'll chain 1 and turn, single crochet in each stitch across. Row 4 also has a total of 10 stitches. Here we are on row 5, chain 1 and turn. For row 5, you'll single crochet in the first stitch, then single crochet decrease, single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches, and then you'll work another single crochet decrease, and then single crochet in the last stitch. Row 5 has a total of 8 stitches. For row 6, you chain 1 and turn, and you'll work 1 single crochet in each stitch across. Row 6 has a total of 8 stitches, and you're halfway there. We have just 6 more rows to go. For row 7, chain 1 and turn. We're going to single crochet in the first stitch, and then a single crochet decrease, single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches, and then you work another single crochet decrease, single crochet in the last stitch for a total of 6 stitches. We move right into row 8 with a chain 1 and turn. You'll single crochet into each stitch across for a total of 6 stitches. Our rows are getting shorter and shorter. For row 9, you'll chain 1 and turn, single crochet in that first stitch, and then single crochet decrease, another single crochet decrease, and then single crochet in the last stitch for a total of 4 stitches. On to row 10, you'll chain 1 and turn, single crochet in each stitch across for a total of 4 stitches. For row 11, you'll chain 1 and turn, and you're going to work a single crochet decrease 2 times. So here's our first one, and then one more single crochet decrease for a total of 2 stitches. Our last row, row 12, chain 1 and turn, and for this row you just work 1 single crochet decrease for a total of 1 stitch. So here we have our first completed triangle. I always like to double check my work, count my rows. And then you might have noticed that at the end of row 12, we're going to finish off, but we're leaving a very long ending tail. We're going to measure off 3 yards or approximately 2.75 meters. And it's because we're going to be using this ending tail to assemble our little mukluk. So after I measure off those 3 yards or 2.75 meters, I'm just going to pull all of that through my final loop. And I'll show you how we can take care of that in just a second. I also wanted to point out, you see that all of our decreases are inset by 1 stitch, and that's because we're going to be working into these end rows of the triangle. So if you were kind of wondering why we were doing those decreases 1 stitch in, it's just to make it a lot easier for us to work into those end rows. Our last 2 rows have decreases, but you can see it's still fairly easy to work into these rows. A great way to manage this extra long tail is to turn it into a little butterfly. I like to wrap it around 4 fingers, and when I come close to the end, I wrap it around the middle to form our little butterfly shape, and I wrap the very end around the last loop. This creates a center pull ball of sorts and just gets that extra yarn out of your way. Now that we have one triangle complete, it's time to make another. Make sure the right side of your granny square is facing. Remember, it kind of curves up at the edges like a little cup when the right side is facing. We're going to make our next triangle adjacent to the one we just made, not opposite, but right next to it, right here. I am going to be sure and timestamp this video so it's very easy for you to go back and follow the directions for the first triangle. The only thing I want to show you with this second triangle is what you do when you come to the side of your granny square where you finished off that granny square. Because remember, at the end of the granny squares, we finished off by working a slip stitch to the first stitch, and then we finished off. You should be fine as long as you're keeping track of your stitch counts. Remember, there'll be a total of 12 single crochets in row 1. I just finished my 10th single crochet, so the last step is to work 2 single crochets in the last stitch. This is where you want to make sure that you're working these last 2 in the right place. Just remember, it's the stitch right before the marked corner stitch. Hopefully that'll help you. I just wanted to take a moment and show this to you because all of your granny squares are going to have this point where we finish them off, and I don't want that to throw off your stitch count. Here is our granny square with 2 cute little triangles. Before we start making the squares, you might want to do this for your second granny squares. Remember, you're making 2 mini mucks, 1 for each foot, so you're going to need to do everything we do in this video twice. Your triangles should be about as high as they are wide. We're not all making the same size mini mucks, so don't worry if your triangles measure differently from mine. So let's keep on going. The right side of our granny square is facing up, and we're going to join just to the left of any corner stitch, and we're going to make our first square. Row 1 of the first square is exactly like row 1 of the triangles. For rows 2 through 12, you'll chain 1 and turn, and then you'll work 1 single crochet in each stitch across. So each of these rows will have a total of 12 stitches. Here we are at the end of the first square. You'll notice that I'm not leaving a long tail on this one. If you're working your shapes in the same position as I am, you don't need a long tail on this square. You want a long finishing tail on the square where the tail ends up in between the two squares. For that square, which will be our last square, you'll also want to leave a 3-yard or a 2.75 meter tail. I have sped things up here. I just finished the very last square. Now it's a little hard to see right now because the work is curling, but the ending tail on this square is in between our two square shapes. So I'm going to measure off another 3 yards, and I'm going to turn this into another one of my little butterflies. So it's time to celebrate. You've completed this granny square. We've got our 2 triangles next to each other at the top and our 2 squares next to each other at the bottom. Remember to do this twice, one for each foot. If we hold it up to our completed sock, you can really get an idea of how this is going to come together. Next week, for part 3, we're going to be assembling all of our granny squares. I hope you enjoyed part 2. Please hit like and subscribe, and also click on that notification bell so you don't miss any part of this project. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.